there's, a lot of opportunities, I think, to use AI smartly. I'm actually a bit of a cynic when it comes to AI generally, because I think it's going through a hype cycle. I think it's very easy for people to assume that you take a technology, you drop it into a business, and it works like a silver bullet and it makes everything better. And AI is almost like kind of like almost like the ultimate version of that, because it has so much promise. When you see the YouTube videos of some amazing experiment, you don't see the 99 failed experiments, but you see the one that worked.
Do you have a personal definition, or have you thought about it, what you mean by AI? And how would you help people understand what AI actually is?
That's interesting. I've certainly read into the history of AI, and it's meant, I suppose it's meant different things at different times. And I think the sort of Turing test type of definition is quite good. Can you tell the difference between a human and a computer, in whatever test it is? I mean, the Turing test is specifically, obviously 99% of your listeners are going to know this already, but I'm just going to say it. But the Turing test originally came around to test whether a chatbot could successfully impersonate a human. And so with, ChatGPT being the first sort of big generative AI program, I think it's very appropriate to have started there in terms of comparisons. But, now, was this painting created by AI or a human? Was this video of a politician created by AI or a human? And that sort of mimicking of both interactions with and the output of human beings, to me, seems like a good way, still a good way to define what AI is really all about.
Yeah.
But that's not the definition that everybody uses. I mean, people use it to talk about performance on benchmarks, and can they do maths faster than or better than a human, and those sorts of things. But it is usually about that comparison with human performance in some field or another. What do you think, Karenza? I mean, you've been working with AI and data for a long time. Do you have a definition?
I think it's when you compare AI and HI, so artificial intelligence and human intelligence, I think artificial intelligence feels like the wrong term for what we actually really mean by AI, because we're not really talking about intelligence in the way that we would describe it for a human being and human beings' intelligence. So it feels like almost the wrong label, but we're sort of stuck with it. It isn't actually intelligence. It's about the creation of something or the learning of something through mathematics, and taming a machine to do what the human is asking it to do. But I haven't got a nice, crisp definition. I heard a nice, crisp definition the other day, but I'm not going to spoil it for our listeners, because one of our other guests gave a really good definition, which I was quite inspired by, which I'm quite taken by as well. But for me, it's about a machine doing something different using the power of mathematics in some sort of creative way, but it's creative inspired by what the human being is actually inputting into the machine. But that's a very long-winded way, and that's not going to help anybody, I'm sure.
No, but what I like about that is essentially you're saying that AI is the output of human input, obviously through very various intermediary layers, but it's nothing without the human input. And I think that is something that it's very easy for people to forget.
Yeah, of course. No, I think companies who are trying to implement or benefit from generative AI technology often are not in a position to, because their data is not where it needs to be. Do you know what I mean? And I think that part gets forgotten about. It's rubbish in, rubbish out at the end of the day, isn't it? But so can we use that as a segue, Jonathan, in terms of, you've been talking about PensionBee, and it seems like your raison d'etre is about customer experience and customers, how they interact with pensions. How can generative AI, or how has generative AI improved your ability to deliver what you want to deliver to your customers, your vision?
Yeah, good segue. So just by way of context, when we've internally discussed using AI, or even before AI, when we were talking about things like chatbots, and that bringing that automation directly to the customers' interactions with us, what we've always been really mindful of is two things. One, a pension pot is a really significant financial asset, where our main service is combining pensions. So people are bringing over often 10,000, 20,000 plus pounds to PensionBee, and their pension pot is, I think when you sort of average it out across the country, it's the second most important financial asset after residential property. So we have to be very mindful of people's sensitivity around the level of service and the level of trust that is required, especially from a new entrant to the market, when you're asking for trust with your lifetime savings. Maybe now at 10 years, there's some of the trust is implied, but I still think it's a question of respect for what you're engaged in. You're engaged in a really serious matter. You're trying to make it as easy as possible and a really pleasant experience, but it's important to take it seriously. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing to be mindful of. And then the other thing as well is the spread of ages and sort of not just age, but the wide demographic profile of our customer base, because it's a mass market product. Mm. And so, a lot of people in that sort of multi-dimensional bell curve are more comfortable speaking to humans about certain things, or not having, the magic of bleeding edge technology sort of waved in their faces when it comes to their financial products. So there's kind of an interplay with the first point I was making. I think, there are many businesses where putting something in that feels really exciting and cutting edges is into the customer interface is totally fine. And if it's a bit messy, it sort of doesn't matter because the stakes are not very high. So I think what I'm perhaps quite obviously getting to is that we've never been massive fans of, sort of putting the robots right in front of consumers.
Yeah.
So let's take it back a stage, put it backstage and look at where the robots can be helpful in the business. And I think there are many opportunities. I think just to stick with the kind of customer service aspects of things, somewhere where I think generative AI can be particularly helpful, but particularly large language models. And so not so much the fact that it's generative, more so much that it understands unstructured information. We get a lot of input and feedback from our customer base. We've got lots of different feedback channels. We capture communications with customers over live chat, email, and phone. And obviously you can take transcripts of phone conversations. So we can generate. Oh, and then that doesn't include all the public feedback channels and the emails, the specifically feedback emails that we get. There's a lot of text-based information that we can gather together, and it's obviously beneficial for us to be able to analyze that in close to real time and in high volume, and be able to do things like look at the trends, look at where people are having problems, look at where people are actually being very positive, so that we can sort of see that stuff has worked. If you try and do all of that analysis work manually, it's a really difficult job. So it's a really we're in the middle of a trial at the moment with our data team to look at what happens if you sort of take all that text and put it into a big analyze it through a big large language model, and do things like sentiment analysis and topic clustering and that kind of thing, and use that to generate a dashboard that replaces that kind of almost impossible to do level of human work, or complements the existing work that was already being done with a much deeper level of analysis. So I think that's a really exciting, promising area, and obviously something that's in common across a lot of businesses. And then I think other areas that are really exciting. We're still at a relatively early stage with looking at the role of AI in sort of software engineering and product development. but I can see why that would have a lot of promise, because a lot of the areas where that can immediately be useful is kind of reducing boilerplate work, or stuff that's in common, and helping with kind of design work, and that seems very promising. And then looking into our operations, we're obviously we're running a lot of very complicated pension transfers for customers, and being able to again work with diverse and unstructured information, and then turn it into something that is a little bit more structured, that we can then derive insights from and take actions from at scale, rather than it being a manual job. That's also seems very promising. So there's a lot of opportunities, I think, to use AI smartly. Although I'm actually a bit of a cynic when it comes to AI generally, because I think it's going through a hype cycle, and I think, as I've said probably on your podcast, but also in other places, I think it's very easy for people to assume that you take a technology, you drop it into a business, and it works like a silver bullet and it makes everything better. And AI is almost like kind of like almost like the ultimate version of that, because it has so much promise. When you see the YouTube videos of some amazing experiment, you don't see the 99 failed experiments, but you see the one that worked.
Yeah.
And so people think, I'm going to put it in my business and boom, I don't need to employ anybody anymore. It's going to run the show. And then of course it doesn't. And there are so many human reasons why that doesn't work. And actually, certain fundamental problems that we're seeing around like controlling hallucinations, and the questions around trademark problems, and privacy problems more broadly. There are just lots of complexities that were papered over, for a long time, that have allowed people's expectations around AI to go a bit through the roof.